Hello, my name is Jim. Welcome to my booktube channel about books and reading and stuff. In this video I want to present the F tag. This is another original tag in my alphabet series. We've had A, B, C, D and E, so now it's the effing F tag. F is for flower. Lots of things begin with F. We have Franz Kafka. Number 5, Fingersmith, fantasy. F is for Ford. F is for Ferrari. Ford v Ferrari was a great film. F is for France and French literature. Emile Zola, Count of Monte Cristo. F. We don't have a lot of countries beginning with F. We have the Faroe Islands between Britain and Iceland, but these are still nominally part of Denmark. Maybe Denmark can sell them to America. A lot of America was bought, like with the Louisiana Purchase. Alaska was bought from Russia, and Denmark sold the Danish Virgin Islands for $25 million to America. Maybe they can get some money for the Faroe Islands. Also we have Finland, but Jere, I'm sorry I haven't read any Finnish literature, but the main one with F is France. Who is your favourite French writer? I lived in France for 6 years. My wife studied French in college. We have a lot of books in French. I don't read much in French now. This is Simenon, Le Comte de Monte Cristo. I know a lot of booktubers have read this recently, mostly in English, and Emile Zola, for example. My favourite French author, though, is Bernard Clavel. Bernard Clavel wrote a lot of books set in Quebec. He's lived in many places. He also wrote a very interesting book about the boatmen on the river Rhône in France in the 19th century. Pirate du Rhône. F is for fiction. What percentage of the books you read are fiction? I think for me, maybe 80 to 90% of the books I read are fiction. There are a few that aren't, like the autobiography by Albert Woodfox called Solitary, about his time in solitary confinement, mostly in Angola prison in Louisiana. There's also the book Stuff, which is about the psychology of hoarding. And there's some books which are sort of a mix of fiction and non-fiction. Little Brother by Ibrahim Balde was about his journey from Guinea to Spain, but this was really memoir, so there was some fiction mixed in with the autobiography. Also Bonjour Mr. President. This was a collection of short stories by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but one of the stories was about who he sat next to on the plane, the Sleeping Beauty. F is for fantasy. Who is your favourite fantasy author? For me, this would probably be George R.R. Martin, famous for writing the Game of Thrones books. This is Clash of Kings. He also wrote this one, Fevre Dream, which is not from the Game of Thrones. It's another F, Fevre Dream. This is about a group of vampires who are travelling up and down the Mississippi in steamships in the 19th century. I like books set on rivers, as you saw with Pirate du Rhône by Bernard Clavel and this Fevre Dream by George R.R. Martin. I might have to revise that because I read Sword of Kaigan at the beginning of the year. I'll link to the review here, and I really like that by M.L. Wang. I've heard her other books are not so good, but I'm interested to see what she writes next, because Sword of Kaigan was a 5-star read. F is for 5 stars. With Goodreads and a lot of other review sites, we can rate books up to a maximum of 5 stars for excellent. Of the books you've read this year, how many would you rate as 5 stars? For me, it's 5 books. So the 28 I finished this year, rate as 5 stars. These would be Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang, which I've already talked about. The autobiography of Albert Woodfox, Solitary. Freshwater, another F, by Akweki Emeze. This is a Nigerian-American author, and this is so unlike anything else I've ever read, but it's a great read. Recently I've rated a couple of books 5 stars. In Dark Water by Lynn McEwan. This is a police procedural set in the south of Scotland, which is being published this month. And the other was Winter Loon by Susan Bernard. I'll link to my review of that here. It was a terrific read. It was a coming-of-age novel set in wintry Minnesota. F is for funny. Now, funny has 2 meanings. We talk about funny peculiar or funny ha-ha. Have you read a novel or a book which would fall into both categories, funny peculiar and funny ha-ha? For me, this would be Round Ireland with a Fridge by Tony Hawks, not the skateboarder, but the comedian. He had a drunken bet with a friend that he could go around Ireland with a fridge. The bet was for $100, and the fridge cost $100. A fridge is another F. And this was peculiar, and it was also very funny, haha. F is for Fight Club and film adaptations. Usually I prefer the book to the film. Are there any books and films where you've rated both the book and the film 5 stars? For me, I can only think of 3 titles that would come into this category. One would be Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, however you pronounce that. Second would be The Godfather by Mario Puzo. And the third would be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Casey. These were all terrific books and terrific films. F is for Frida. Steve Donahue suggested I should have a tag for Frida, Frida being his schnauzer. Steve Donahue, if you don't know him, is a legend on this corner of booktube. He has over 4,000 videos on booktube. He's a professional reviewer. He spends his days reading books, reviewing books and talking about them on booktube. I'll link in the show notes below to his channel. Frida for me isn't the name of his schnauzer. Frida for me is the name of my mother. My mother was born in 1935. She lived through the Blitz in London. She wasn't evacuated like many of her classmates were. And I have my dear departed mother to thank for teaching me how to read before I went to school. The kids who I went to school with, if they couldn't read, they had to learn ITA, which was the International Teaching Alphabet, which was in vogue at the time, at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. But those who learned with the ITA had trouble later transferring from ITA to conventional English. ITA was designed to make it easier to pick up reading because English might have 26 letters, but there are 44 sounds in English. And this was closely related to the different sounds of English, like C could be S or K or Ch or something like this. She passed away in 2016. The last time I was in Britain was for her funeral. So for me, Frida is my mother, but for Steve it's his schnauzer, Frida. And F is for furry friends. This is your chance to show me your furry friends. Here, our furry friend, our pet, is Abby, who you've seen before if you've seen any of these other tags. F is for flowers. What was the last book you read with flower or the name of a flower in the title? For me, this would be Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, which was an evocative portrait of growing up in the 30s and a lot of nostalgia there. is for flash fiction. Flash fiction are very short stories. Ernest Hemingway is attributed with one just 6-word story. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Franz Kafka had some flash fiction. This is the essential Kafka. It doesn't have all his works in, but he has this one, A Little Fable. As you see, it's just 7 lines. I'll read it to you. "Oh," said the mouse, "the world gets narrower every day. At first it was so wide that I was afraid. I went on and was glad when at last in the distance I saw walls to left and right. But these long walls converge so quickly that I'm already in the last room. And there in the corner stands the trap I am running into. You only have to run in a different direction," said the cat, and ate up the mouse. Kafka had this very dark humour. His friends would say that when he read out Metamorphoses, he would often be in fits of laughter. If you're interested in flash fiction, I would suggest you read 28 Far Cries by Mark Nash. I read it earlier in the year, 28 very short stories. It's a very interesting read. Many different examples of flash fiction. Mark Nash is an artist with words. You might need to check in the dictionary some of the words he uses, but it was a very interesting experience. So, those are my prompts for the F tag. You can add other prompts. Lots of things begin with F. Florida begins with F. You might want a prompt about Carl Hiaasen, probably Florida's most famous writer. Lots of writers begin with F. Faulkner, Fitzgerald, Feist. Raymond Feist is one of Kit's favourite writers and one I should check out sometime. Finally, another F. Who do I tag? I usually tag the channels I'm following that begin with the letter of the tag. With F, there aren't many. There's Ashley at A Frolic Through Fiction, there's Melissa at Fully Booked, and there's Faith at Faith and Books. These are all great channels. I'll link to their channels in the show notes below. I'll also tag Steve Donoghue, because Steve Donoghue has a dog called Frida, as I already mentioned, but Frida begins with F. But if you like these prompts, you want to do them, please feel free to do them. My channel doesn't begin with F and I did them. If you like this video, you can like and subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video. Farewell.